Whispers before the storm. In the flickering candlelight of a Boston tavern basement, where the air hung heavy with the scent of ale and tobacco, a young printer's apprentice named Thomas Whitaker overheard words that would forever alter the course of his life. It was August 1765, and the Stamp Act had just been passed by a distant parliament, imposing taxes on every printed page in the colonies. Thomas, hiding behind a stack of barrels, watched as shadowy figures swore oaths of defiance. "No taxation without representation," one whispered fiercely. Little did he know, these whispers were the sparks that would ignite the American Revolution. Thomas Whitaker was no revolutionary by birth. Born in 1745 to a Loyalist family in Philadelphia, he had been apprenticed to a Boston printer at age 15, learning the craft of inking presses and setting type. His father, a merchant who traded loyally with British suppliers, had warned him against the rabble-rousers stirring trouble in the colonies. But Boston was a cauldron of unrest. The French and Indian War had ended just 2 years prior, in 1763. Leaving Britain drowning in debt and the colonies burdened with new taxes to pay it off. Thomas saw the hardship firsthand, printers like his master struggling under the weight of duties on paper, ink, and even playing cards. The Sugar Act of 1764 had already squeezed merchants, but the Stamp Act was the breaking point. It required a revenue stamp on every legal document, newspaper, and pamphlet, effectively taxing knowledge itself. One humid evening, as Thomas delivered broadsheets to the Green Dragon Tavern, a notorious haunt for dissidents, he stumbled upon the secret meeting. The group called themselves the Loyal Nine, precursors to what would become the Sons of Liberty. Led by fiery orators like Samuel Adams, a failed brewer turned political agitator, they plotted in hushed tones. Adams, with his piercing eyes and unyielding voice, declared, "This act is tyranny. We must resist, or we shall be slaves." Thomas's heart raced. He had printed pamphlets decrying the taxes, but this was different, real conspiracy, punishable by hanging. Drawn by curiosity and a budding sense of injustice, Thomas revealed himself. The men tensed, hands reaching for hidden daggers, but Adams stayed them. "Who are you, lad?" he demanded. Thomas stammered his name and occupation. To his surprise, Adams smiled. "A printer? Perfect. We need men who can spread the word without stamps." That night, Thomas swore the oath: loyalty to the colonies, defiance against the crown. He became one of the whispers before the storm. As weeks turned to months, Thomas immersed himself in the underground network. The Sons of Liberty expanded rapidly, forming chapters from Boston to Philadelphia. In New York, Isaac Sears and John Lamb led similar groups, while in Virginia, Patrick Henry thundered speeches in the House of Burgesses. Thomas's first task was distributing anonymous broadsides, pamphlets railing against the Stamp Act, printed in secret presses hidden in cellars. He learned the art of evasion, dodging British patrols by night, using coded messages like "The Tree of Liberty must be refreshed" to signal meetings. But the activities grew bolder. On August 14, 1765, the Sons orchestrated their first major protest. Thomas was there when they hung an effigy of Andrew Oliver, the appointed stamp distributor, from the Liberty Tree, a massive elm in Boston's Hanover Square. The tree had become a symbol of resistance, where colonists gathered to voice grievances. Crowds swelled, chanting "Liberty, property, and no stamps." That night, under cover of darkness, the mob, egged on by sons like Ebenezer McIntosh, a shoemaker and street leader, stormed Oliver's home. Thomas watched in awe and horror as they smashed windows, looted furniture, and forced Oliver to resign. It was a triumph, but the risk was palpable. "One wrong move and we're all hanged," whispered Paul Revere, the silversmith and engraver who would become Thomas's closest ally. Revere, a master craftsman with a network of writers, taught Thomas the importance of communication. "Words are our weapons," Revere said, showing him engravings that depicted British officials as tyrants. Together, they smuggled goods to evade taxes, part of a broader boycott. John Hancock, the wealthy merchant whose smuggling operations funded much of the resistance, provided ships and funds. Hancock's flamboyant signature would later grace the Declaration of Independence, but in these early days, he was a shadowy financier. Thomas marveled at how these men, brewers, merchants, artisans, united against an empire. Yet not all was unity. Thomas discovered fractures within the group. Some, like James Otis Jr., advocated legal challenges, arguing in courts that the acts violated colonial charters. Otis's famous 1761 speech against writs of assistance, general search warrants, had inspired many, but his mental health was deteriorating, leading to erratic behavior. Others pushed for violence. Thomas himself grappled with doubt. His family in Philadelphia remained loyalists. Letters from his father pleaded for caution. "The king will protect us," his father wrote. But Thomas saw the opposite. British troops quartered in homes, enforcing laws with bayonets. The storm gathered momentum with the Townshend Acts of 1767, imposing duties on glass, lead, paints, paper, and tea. The Sons responded with non-importation agreements, urging colonists to boycott British goods. Thomas traveled to Philadelphia, linking with chapters there. In the city of brotherly love, he met Dr. Benjamin Rush, a young physician and future signer of the Declaration, who spoke of Enlightenment ideals. "We are born free," he argued, echoing John Locke. But danger lurked. British customs officials, like John Malcolm, were tarred and feathered for enforcing the acts. A brutal punishment Thomas witnessed once, the victim's screams haunting him. Back in Boston, tensions boiled over on March 5, 1770, the Boston Massacre. Thomas was in the crowd that night, protesting the presence of redcoats. A scuffle erupted outside the custom house. Snowballs and insults flew. When Private Hugh White struck a boy, the mob surged. Captain Thomas Preston's soldiers fired into the crowd, killing 5, including Crispus Atkiss, an escaped slave of African and native descent, the first martyr of the Revolution. Thomas narrowly escaped, a bullet grazing his coat. Revere's engraving of the event, titled "The Bloody Massacre," spread like wildfire, inflaming colonial opinion. "This is what tyranny looks like," Revere told Thomas as they printed copies by lantern light. The massacre galvanized the Sons, but it also drew scrutiny. Thomas began noticing a shadow, Elias Thorne, a fellow apprentice who seemed too eager, asking probing questions. Was he a spy? Paranoia set in. The British offered rewards for informers, and betrayals were common. In 1772, the Gaspee affair in Rhode Island showed the Sons' reach. Colonists burned the British schooner Gaspee after it ran aground chasing smugglers. Thomas heard whispers of similar plans in Boston. By 1773, the Tea Act reignited fury. Meant to bail out the East India Company, it allowed direct tea sales to colonies, undercutting smugglers like Hancock. "It's not the tax, it's the monopoly," Adams railed at a meeting in the Old South Meeting House. Thomas, now a trusted member, helped organize the response. On December 16, 1773, disguised as Mohawk Indians to symbolize American identity,
Over 100 sons, including Thomas, Revere, and Warren, boarded 3 ships in Boston Harbor. Thomas's hands trembled as he smashed chests with an axe, dumping 342 chests of tea into the water, worth 9,000 pounds, a fortune. It was the silent defiance. No one spoke, only the splash of tea breaking the night. It was the Boston Tea Party, a pivotal whisper that echoed across the Atlantic.
The invisible patriots. Behind Washington's army stood a hidden network, farmers, merchants, and women who carried coded messages in hymns and bread loaves. Their quiet bravery shaped battles history barely remembers. Whispers beneath the gunfire. The night was moonless over the fields of New York in 1778. A lone rider moved through the mist, his horse's hooves muffled in the damp earth. In his saddlebag, hidden beneath loaves of coarse bread, lay a slip of parchment marked with invisible ink. The rider wasn't a soldier. He was a farmer named Caleb Brewster, one of Washington's most trusted couriers. The message he carried could alter the course of the war. History would one day speak of George Washington, of Hamilton and Greene, but the fate of the Revolution often rested in the hands of those history forgot. Farmers, merchants, mothers and daughters who risked everything to pass a single message. They were the invisible patriots, the silent army behind the lines. The war beyond the battlefield. By 1777, the British occupied New York City, turning it into a fortress of redcoats and loyalists. Washington's army, battered and undersupplied, clung to survival across the Hudson. Every musket, every maneuver depended on information, and that meant spies. But unlike the grand tales of espionage from Europe's courts, America's intelligence war was waged in kitchens, barns, and taverns. It wasn't fought by professionals, it was carried by the common people. A blacksmith might notice a convoy of wagons heading south. A merchant's wife might overhear officers discussing troop movements. A young courier could ride through enemy territory under the guise of delivering farm goods. Each acted alone, unaware that their fragments of information would weave together into a web so intricate that even British intelligence couldn't see it until it was too late. The Culper Ring, America's hidden network. The most remarkable of these invisible patriots formed what later became known as the Culper Spy Ring. It was established in 1778 at the request of General Washington himself, who desperately needed eyes inside British-controlled New York. The network was small but brilliant. At its heart were 2 men, Abraham Woodhull, a farmer from Setauket, Long Island, who operated under the alias Samuel Culper Sr., and Robert Townsend, a quiet merchant who owned a shop in Manhattan, known to the ring as Samuel Culper Jr. Their mission was simple yet deadly: send intelligence from New York to Washington's headquarters across the Long Island Sound without getting caught by British patrols or Loyalist informers. They created a system that rivaled anything Europe's spies had built. They used invisible ink, coded names, and even a numerical cipher where 711 stood for General Washington himself. Townsend's reports traveled to Woodhull, then by courier to Caleb Brewster, who ferried them across the water under the cover of night. Each man risked the gallows with every word he wrote. The women who wove secrets. Yet some of the most ingenious members of this hidden network were women whose courage history nearly erased. One of them was Anna Strong, Woodhull's neighbor in Setauket. She devised a signal system so clever that the British never suspected it. When Caleb Brewster was ready to collect intelligence from across the Sound, Anna would hang her black petticoat on the clothesline to signal that Brewster was nearby. Then she'd add white handkerchiefs, each representing a specific cove, showing where the drop would occur. No one would think twice about a woman hanging laundry, yet her clothesline became a code that helped the revolution survive. And then there were countless others, unnamed and unrecorded, who smuggled litters stitched into hems, baked into loaves, or hid inside baskets of eggs.
A message might travel through 10 hands before reaching a general. None of those hands belonged to men in uniform. They were mothers pretending to sell butter, daughters fetching water, widows walking to church, all while carrying the lifeblood of a nation yet unborn. Shadows in New York. In British-occupied New York, fear was everywhere. Redcoats patrolled the streets, loyalists reported suspicious whispers, and any hint of treason meant imprisonment or hanging. Robert Townsend, working as a shopkeeper and journalist, lived at the heart of this danger. He had access to officers' gossip, British merchants, and even gatherings of high-ranking officials. By day, he was a loyal subject of the crown. By night, he was Washington's eyes. Once, he overheard that the British planned to send counterfeit continental currency to ruin the rebel economy. His warning helped Washington prepare for the crisis. Another time, he uncovered intelligence about a surprise attack on French forces, saving the alliance that would one day help America win the war. Townsend never sought fame. He never revealed his role, not even to his family. When he died in 1838, his secret went with him, only discovered decades later in letters found in dusky archives. The secret ink and the silent codes. The Copper Ring's success depended on innovation as much as courage. Washington himself championed the use of sympathetic stain, invisible ink created by the scientist Dr. James Jay, brother of John Jay, a future Supreme Court Just Chief. Spies wrote messages between the lines of innocent-looking letters. To the naked eye, they seemed blank. But when the recipient applied the right reagent, a mixture known only to trusted hands, the invisible words appeared like ghosts. They also developed ciphers. Each person, place, and phrase assigned a number. 711 was Washington. 745 meant New York. 727 stood for British General Ho. If a courier was captured, the message would seem like nonsense. It was the 18th century's version of encryption, and it worked. Washington's intelligence network became one of the most effective in the world, influencing every major decision he made from 1778 onward. The silent sacrifices. Not all invisible patriots lived to see freedom. Some vanished into the fog of war, their names lost to time. There was the mysterious Agent 355, believed to be a woman within the Copper Ring who moved among British high society in New York. Some historians suggest she was a loyalist mistress or a merchant's daughter. Others believe she had connections to Major John Andrew, the British spy master. Her intelligence exposed Benedict Arnold's treachery before it could destroy Washington's army. But shortly afterward, records suggest she was captured and died aboard a British prison book, a fate worse than death itself in those dark, disease-ridden hulks. Who she was remains unknown, but Washington's letters hint at his grief. Her service has been of infinite value. Her name, lost to history, became a symbol of every woman who served in silence.
The ciphered war. As redcoats marched, ink and paper became deadlier than bullets. Invisible ink, false letters, and midnight couriers turned espionage into America's first weapon of deception. Prologue: the message that saved an army. The night of June 14, 1779 was suffocatingly still. Deep in the Hudson Valley, a lone rider tore through the darkness, his horse slick with sweat. In his coat, hidden beneath layers of parchment and thread, he carried a message that could save General Washington's army, or destroy it. The paper appeared blank. To any soldier who searched him, it was an empty letter. But when held near a candle flame and brushed with a secret chemical, ghostly words would bloom upon it. Troop movements, British supply routes, plans whispered inside the enemy's own headquarters. This was not a battle of muskets and cannons. It was a war fought with ink, code, and deception. A war where a single misplaced letter could end a revolution. It was the ciphered war, America's first great intelligence struggle. Chapter 1: Shadows Before the Storm. By 1776, the dream of independence was already bleeding. Washington's army, ill-fed and outnumbered, was being hunted across New York. The British Navy ruled the harbors, and spies thrived in every alley of occupied cities. Washington knew he could not match the British in numbers or firepower, but he could outthink them. He wrote, "There is nothing more necessary than good intelligence to frustrate a designing enemy." It was here, amid defeat and desperation, that America's first secret war began, not on battlefields, but in letters written by candlelight, disguised in the folds of a dress or the crust of a loaf of bread. These letters would travel hundreds of miles through forests, across rivers, and past enemy sentries, bearing no signatures, no visible ink, and often no trace of the writer's identity. Chapter 2. The Birth of a Secret Army. After a string of humiliating defeats in 1777, Washington decided to form an invisible army, a web of spies who could see what the Redcoats could not. The idea came to life through Benjamin Talmadge, a Yale-educated officer with a gift for secrecy. Under Washington's orders, Talmadge built what would become the Culper Spy Ring, a small but powerful network that operated right under the British nose in New York City. Talmadge created a sophisticated code book, assigning numbers to every word, meme, and place. 711 stood for General Washington. 745 meant New York. 727 for General Howe. Even the names of spies were hidden. Samuel Culper Sr. and Samuel Culper Jr. were aliases for Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend. Every message they sent was encrypted, disguised, and protected by what Washington called the sympathetic stain, invisible ink invented by Dr. James J., brother of future Chief Justice John Jay. It was a war of minds, and for the first time in history, America was leading it. Chapter 3. The Science of Secrecy. Dr. J's invisible ink was a marvel of its age. Composed of metallic salts and secret reagents, it allowed messages to be hidden between the lines of ordinary correspondence. To any observer, a letter might read like a grocery list or a love note. But under chemical reaction, or the heat of a candle, the invisible words came alive, revealing plans, maps, and intelligence that could decide the fate of thousands. This ink turned spies into scientists and couriers into alchemists. One British officer later wrote, "It seems the rebels have a magic powder that writes what cannot be seen, and yet reads what should not be known." But secrecy came at a price. If captured, the bearer of an invisible message faced execution without trial. Hanging was the usual fate. Imprisonment on a British prison ship was worse. Still, the couriers rode, through rain, snow, and enemy lines, carrying the invisible bloodline of the Revolution. Chapter 4. False Letters and Deadly Deceptions. Washington's genius wasn't just in gathering intelligence, it was in weaponizing misinformation. In 1780, as British General Henry Clinton planned to move forces from New York to Virginia, Washington crafted a bold deception. He had his agents leak false letters suggesting the Continental Army would attack New York instead. Intercepted by the British, the fake documents convinced Clinton to hold his troops in place, buying time for the real operation, the march south to Yorktown. That ruse, written on ink and parchment, helped pave the way for America's decisive victory. Washington understood the psychological dimension of war better than most generals of his age. "Deception," he wrote, "is a weapon as sharp as any bayonet." It wasn't just about knowing the enemy's plans, it was about making the enemy believe the wrong thing. Chapter 5. The Silent Couriers. Every coded message had to be delivered, and the couriers who carried them were among the most courageous people in the Revolution. Caleb Brewster, a seaman turned spy, navigated the treacherous waters between Connecticut and Long Island, dodging British ships under moonlight. His small whaleboat carried barrels of fish, and hidden within them, letters from the Culper Ring. Then there were women like Anna Strong who signaled to Brewster using a secret laundry code. A black petticoat on her clothesline meant Brewster was nearby. White handkerchiefs indicated which cove he should land in.
It was simple. It was genius, and it was invisible to every redcoat who rode past her farm. Sometimes even children carried intelligence in hollowed-out quills or stitched into doll clothes. Every age, every class became part of the ciphered war.
Betrayal in the ranks. Within the heart of the revolution, not all men fought for liberty. Spies changed sides, generals whispered to the enemy, and one man's ambition nearly unraveled Washington's cause. Prologue, a letter that could kill. It was a gray morning in New York City, 1780, when Major John Andre walked briskly through the cobblestone streets, a sealed letter tucked inside his boot. Its contents were explosive, a plan so dangerous it could have handed the Continental Army's most prized fortress to the British in a single stroke. To any passerby, Andre seemed a dutiful officer, polite and proper in his redcoat uniform. But inside, he carried more than ink and paper. He carried the proof of betrayal from one of George Washington's own generals. History remembers heroes in uniform, but the revolution was also defined by shadows, whispers, treachery, and men whose ambition made them willing to sell a nation for personal gain. This is the story of the betrayal that nearly destroyed Washington's cause, the intrigue that unfolded behind the battle lines, in the dark corners of taverns, and under the very roofs of those who swore loyalty to freedom. Chapter 1. The Seeds of Ambition. Benedict Arnold had once been celebrated as a hero of the Continental Army. His leadership in the capture of Fort Ticonderoga in 1775 and at Saratoga in 1777 had earned him admiration and medals. Washington himself trusted Arnold implicitly, praising his courage and skill. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Arnold felt unappreciated, overlooked by Congress, and embittered by financial strains and political slights. Every minor injustice festered in his mind, turning loyalty into resentment. Arnold began secret negotiations with the British, offering them West Point, the strategic fortification on the Hudson River. It was an audacious plan. Surrender the fortress, destroy the Continental Army's defensive position, and cement his place in history on the side of the Crown. Chapter 2. A Network of Spies. Washington's intelligence network, led by Benjamin Tallmadge, was among the most sophisticated in the world. The Culper Ring, composed of ordinary citizens turned spies, operated quietly in New York City and Long Island, sending coded messages through invisible ink and secret ciphers. Even so, the threat from within was harder to detect. Arnold had carefully masked his intentions, writing letters and making movements that appeared to serve the revolution. Only by piecing together reports from multiple agents could Tallmadge and Washington begin to suspect treachery. One such agent was the mysterious woman known only as Agent 355, a member of the Culper Ring, who moved among Loyalist society in New York City. Her intelligence suggested that someone high-ranking within the Continental Army might be compromised. Every intercepted letter, every whispered conversation in a tavern became a critical clue in the unfolding mystery. Chapter 3. The Meeting at West Point. Arnold's plan required careful coordination with the British. He corresponded with Major John Andre, the British Army's trusted officer and spymaster. Their letters outlined the handover of West Point, the timing of troop movements, and methods to evade detection. For Andre, it was a delicate mission. One misstep could mean capture and execution. Yet the audacity of Arnold's betrayal made the plan seem possible. West Point was under Arnold's command, its defenses carefully arranged to mislead and manipulate. André's fateful ride north to meet Arnold in September 1780 would soon become the turning point. Chapter 4: Suspicion in the Ranks. While Arnold's betrayal progressed in secrecy, Washington's intelligence network was quietly active. Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend, operating under the aliases Samuel Culper Sr. and Jr., had intercepted fragments of letters and rumors. Small details, an unexplained movement of troops, a delivery of supplies to West Point but didn't match official orders, added up. Then came the intercepted correspondence revealing Arnold's communications with the British. These letters were painstakingly pieced together by spies who risked their lives daily to ensure that no clue went unnoticed. Washington, a master of patience and observation, began to suspect that one of his own generals was planning a betrayal, but he had no proof, and a false accusation could have demoralized the army and risked exposure of the intelligence network. Chapter 5: The Capture of André. On September 23, 1780, fate intervened. Major John André was captured by American militiamen near Tarrytown, New York. Hidden in his boot were the incriminating papers outlining Arnold's plan. When André was brought before American officers, the reality of the betrayal became undeniable. The documents revealed not only Arnold's intentions, but also his meticulous planning and willingness to sacrifice American soldiers for personal gain. André himself, charismatic and composed, tried to argue that he was a prisoner of war acting under orders, but the papers spoke louder than words. Chapter 6: Washington confronts the traitor. Benedict Arnold learned of André's capture before he could complete the handover. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he fled West Point under the cover of night, escaping to British lines with nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge that his name would forever be tainted. Washington, meanwhile, faced a difficult decision. André was an officer, honorable even in betrayal, but the law was clear. He was tried as a spy and hanged, a reminder that the revolution could not survive if treachery went unpunished. Washington's letters reveal his complex feelings: anger at the betrayal, sorrow for André's fate, and deep concern over the fragility of the cause he had devoted his life to defending. Voices from the shadows. In the moonlit streets of occupied New York City, where British redcoats patrolled like ghosts in the fog, a veiled woman slipped through the shadows, her heart pounding louder than the distant harbor bells. It was July 1779, and Eliza Harrington clutched a seemingly innocent letter in her gloved hand, a missive that could topple empires if decoded. One wrong glance from a sentry, and she'd swing from the gallows. But Eliza was no ordinary widow. She was Agent 355, the enigmatic voice from the shadows whose whispers fueled the American Revolution's hidden war. Eliza Harrington wasn't born to espionage. Raised in a loyalist family in Manhattan, she married young to a merchant who traded in silks and spices, oblivious to the brewing storm of independence. The year was 1776, when the Declaration rang out, but for Eliza, the real turning point came with the British occupation. Her husband, sympathetic to the patriots despite his trade ties, died mysteriously in 1777, poisoned, some whispered, by Tory rivals. Widowed at 25, Eliza inherited a modest townhouse on Queen Street, a facade of respectability that masked her growing resentment. The redcoats quartered in homes, seized goods, and executed dissenters without trial. "They treat us like conquered subjects," she confided to a neighbor one evening, unaware that her words reached ears connected to the Continental Army. That neighbor was Robert Townsend, a quiet Quaker merchant who ran a coffee shop on Water Street, a hub for gossip among British officers and loyalists. Unknown to most, Townsend was Culper Jr., a key operative in George Washington's secret spy ring. Recruited in 1778 by Major Benjamin Tallmadge, Washington's intelligence chief, Townsend posed as a loyalist to gather secrets from high society patrons. Tallmadge, a Yale-educated dragoon from Setauket, Long Island, had formed the Culper spy ring to pierce the veil of British operations in New York, their stronghold after evacuating Boston. The ring's name derived from pseudonyms. Abraham Woodhull, a Setauket farmer, was Culper's senior. Townsend, his urban counterpart. Townsend noticed Eliza's sharp wit and social connections. Her late husband's friends included British majors who dined at her home. In a coded letter to Tallmadge, he wrote, "A lady of acquaintance, 355, may prove invaluable." The number 355 from the ring's codebook meant lady, a term reserved for women of status. Eliza's recruitment was subtle. A chance meeting at a market where Townsend slipped her a pamphlet decrying British taxes. Inside, invisible ink revealed a message: "If freedom calls, meet at dusk by the old elm." Intrigued and fueled by grief, Eliza went. There, Townsend explained the risks. "We fight with whispers, not muskets. One betrayal and we all hang." Eliza's first task was simple yet perilous: eavesdrop at a dinner party hosted by a British colonel. Dressed in finery, she charmed officers with tales of colonial life, all while noting troop numbers and ship arrivals. The Culper ring's methods were ingenious, born of necessity in a city swarming with spies. Messages were written in invisible ink, a formula of ferrous sulfate and water, developed by Sir James J., brother of founding father John J. When heated or treated with a reagent like tannic acid from oak galls, the words appeared. Eliza penned her reports on scraps hidden in hems or hollow quill pens, but transmission was the true art. Townsend collected intel at his coffee shop, where Austin Rowe, a tavern keeper from Setauket, posed as a customer. Rowe's orders were code for drops, a bundle of goods concealed messages. Rowe rode 55 miles to Setauket, hiding papers in saddlebags or farm produce. There, Woodhull stored them on his property until Anna Strong, a neighbor and patriot wife, signaled readiness. Anna Strong's laundry line was legendary. A black petticoat meant Caleb Brewster, the ring's daring boatman, awaited across Long Island Sound. The number of handkerchiefs indicated the cove, 6 for the 6th inlet. Brewster, a former whaler, ferried the intel to Tallmadge in Connecticut, who relayed it to Washington. Eliza's whispers grew bolder. In August 1779, she infiltrated a loyalist ball where Major John Andre, the charming British spymaster, flirted openly. Andre, adjutant to General Clinton, boasted of reinforcements sailing from England, 5,000 redcoats bound for Charleston. Eliza feigned interest, her mind racing. That night, she wrote in code, 727, New York, harbors 745, England, fleet, 5,000 redcoats, south. The Culper Codebook, a 763-entry numerical dictionary, protected such secrets. 711 for Washington, 712 for Clinton, 727 for New York, no names, only numbers. The message's journey was fraught. Rowe nearly collided with a British patrol en route to Setauket, hiding in a haystack as soldiers searched. Woodhull, paranoid after a close arrest in 1778, buried the paper under a tree. Anna Strong's signal, a petticoat fluttering in the wind, summoned Brewster, who crossed the Sound under cannon fire from British ships. Tallmadge decoded it. Washington's army, encamped in Morristown, adjusted plans, bolstering Southern defenses. Historians later credited this intel with thwarting a British push that could have crushed the Continental forces early on. But shadows held dangers. Eliza's double life strained her.
Rumor swirled of a female spy. British counterintelligence, led by Andre, tightened nets. In one heart-stopping incident, a redcoat searched her carriage at a checkpoint. "Just visiting kin," she smiled, her coded letter sewn into her petticoat. The soldier waved her through, but sweat beaded her brow. Personal tolls mounted. Eliza's maid, a freed black woman named Phoebe, suspected her mistress's nocturnal absences. Inspired by figures like James Armistead Lafayette, an enslaved Virginian who spied for the Marquis de Lafayette by posing as a runaway in British camps, Eliza confided in Phoebe, recruiting her for minor tasks. Phoebe's network among servants uncovered supply shortages in British barracks, adding layers to reports. The Ring's greatest coup came in 1780, exposing Benedict Arnold's treason. Arnold, the hero of Saratoga turned traitor, plotted to surrender West Point to the British for £20,000. Andre met Arnold secretly, but Culper whispers caught wind. Townsend overheard loyalist chatter in his shop. Eliza, at a soiree, noted Andre's absences. Woodhull's letter warned, "Traitor in ranks, Hudson Fortress at risk." Brewster's boat dashed the alert to Talmadge in Connecticut. On September 23, 1780, militiamen captured Andre near Tarrytown Papers in his boot, revealing the plot. Arnold fled to British lines, but West Point was saved. Washington later wrote, "The timely discovery prevented a most fatal stab." Eliza's role? A whisper in the chain, yet pivotal. Her social access confirmed Andre's movements.
The forgotten echo. Centuries later, lost letters and hidden graves still tell a story the textbooks never dared to. How freedom was not merely won by muskets, but by the silent courage of those who never sought glory. Prologue: A letter found in dust. In 1935, a historian dusting through the archives of a Long Island farmhouse discovered a small, brittle envelope, its edges frayed and ink nearly faded. Inside lay a series of letters, carefully folded, written in invisible ink that had survived decades hidden between the pages of a ledger. The letters were unsigned, yet they described plans, troop movements, and secrets that had guided the Continental Army during the darkest days of the Revolution. They spoke of men and women whose names would never appear on monuments, who risked their lives in silence, and whose courage had quietly shaped the birth of a nation. This was the forgotten echo of history, a story of freedom that textbooks had never dared to tell. Chapter 1: Shadows Behind the Battle Lines. By 1777, the war for American independence was not just fought on fields like Saratoga or Valley Forge. It was also fought in shadows, in barns, kitchens, and along riverbanks. George Washington's army, stretched thin and constantly pursued by British forces, relied more than muskets and strategy. They depended on intelligence, information carried by ordinary citizens who understood that knowledge could be a weapon deadlier than cannon fire. Among these operatives were Caleb Brewster, a daring sailor who ferried messages across Long Island Sound, Anna Strong, a widow who signaled his movements with her clothesline, and Abraham Woodhull and Robert Townsend, members of the Culper spy ring whose coded letters warned Washington of enemy plans. They moved in plain sight. A farmer tending crops, a merchant delivering goods, or a young woman walking to market. Anyone could be carrying vital intelligence without the British ever suspecting. Chapter 2: Messages in the Everyday. One of the most brilliant techniques of these unsung heroes was the use of everyday objects to hide secrets. Letters were stitched into hems of dresses, baked into bread loaves, or concealed within hollowed-out quills. Invisible ink, developed by Dr. James Jay, was another revolutionary innovation. Between the lines of ordinary correspondence, messages appeared only when treated with the proper chemical solution. What seemed like mundane notes about trade or family matters could reveal enemy troop movements or plans for surprise attacks. In one letter, Woodhull described the positioning of British troops near New York Harbor, information that Washington would later use to orchestrate troop movements that saved thousands of lives. The names of these operatives were often omitted, leaving their courage hidden in the shadows of history. Chapter 3: The Women of the Revolution. Women played a role as indispensable as any general or soldier. They carried intelligence, acted as couriers, and developed signaling systems to communicate across dangerous territory. Anna Strong, for instance, used a black petticoat on her laundry line as a simple yet effective code. When she hung white handkerchiefs alongside it, Brewster knew exactly where to land his boat to retrieve or deliver intelligence. No redcoat would ever suspect that a line of laundry was in fact a lifeline for a revolutionary army. Another figure, known only as Agent 355, infiltrated Loyalist gatherings in New York City, gathering critical intelligence on British plans and reporting it through the Culper Ring. Her identity remains a mystery, but her contributions were crucial in unmasking traitors and preventing disasters such as the treachery of Benedict Arnold. Chapter 4: The Treachery of Benedict Arnold. The revolution was not just threatened by foreign armies, it was threatened from within. Benedict Arnold, once a celebrated hero of the Continental Army, allowed ambition and resentment to turn him against the very cause he had fought to defend. Arnold's plot to surrender West Point to the British in 1780 could have changed the course of the war entirely. Yet the careful work of spies in the shadows, intercepted letters, coded messages, and intelligence relayed by couriers exposed his treachery before it was too late. Major John Andre, the British officer coordinating with Arnold, was captured and the plot unraveled. Arnold fled to British lines, his name forever synonymous with betrayal, while countless nameless patriots who had risked everything to stop him remained in obscurity. Chapter 5: Survival Through Secrets. The winter of 1777 at Valley Forge tested Washington's army to its limits. Frostbite, hunger, and disease killed hundreds, yet the army survived, in part thanks to intelligence networks that supplied critical information about British movements and supply lines. Couriers rode through snow and ice carrying coded messages that directed reinforcements and supplies. A letter delivered to Washington could mean the difference between a strategic retreat and annihilation. The work of these operatives, silent and largely invisible, kept the revolution alive. Their efforts were unnoticed by the masses, but without their dedication, the army might have collapsed long before it faced the British at Yorktown. Chapter 6: Hidden Graves and Silent Legacies. Many of these operatives paid the ultimate price. Some died in secret, far from the battlefields, buried in unmarked graves to protect their families and identities. Others lived out their lives quietly, their contributions unrecorded and forgotten. In one letter, Brewster described a midnight crossing of the Sound. The oars cut through the black water, each stroke carrying whispers of liberty. Not a soul can know of this, yet the world will someday feel its impact. It is these whispers, these hidden acts of courage that form the backbone of the revolution. Chapter 7: The Lasting Impact. The sacrifices of these invisible patriots ensured that the American experiment could survive. Their methods, coded letters, invisible ink, signals in plain sight, laid the foundation for modern intelligence practices. While Washington, Hamilton, and Lafayette are celebrated in history books, the true heartbeat of the revolution was maintained by those who remained unnamed,
working in shadows, their bravery never seeking recognition. Even centuries later, their legacy echoes in the letters, artifacts, and hidden graves that still surface in old homes and archives, reminding us that freedom is defended not only with muskets, but with vigilance, courage, and unheralded sacrifice. Epilogue: The Forgotten Echo. When a historian today uncovers a long-forgotten ledger, a faded letter, or a family tale passed down through generations, they are hearing the voices from the shadows. These are the patriots who shaped history without monuments, medals, or accolades. Their courage was quiet, but it reverberates through time, whispering the truth that liberty was won not only on battlefields, but in kitchens, taverns, and hidden docks where ordinary citizens became extraordinary guardians of a nation yet to be born.